Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
There are 4 things I like to tell parents who did not have secure experiences to sort of bookmark in their mind. So these are just quick little quips that you can go, okay, if I can do this, at least I know I'm giving them a real shot at secure experience with me. The first is to light up when your children come into the room. Mm-hmm. Like a dog. That's why our dogs are our best friends, because they give us this unconditional excitement. Our kids need to see and know they are wanted by us, because when they go out into the world, they aren't going to be wanted by everyone.
Hey friend, I'm Julie Lyles Carr, and this is the AllMomDoes podcast, where we love to come alongside you for all the things you're doing, raising the kids, chasing the career, growing your faith walk, that romance that you're nurturing. That's why when I saw this come across my email, I was like, yes, please, immediately, because there is a topic that I've long been fascinated by. I've kind of had a renewed fascination with it in the last couple of years. And this person's take on this topic is so great. I can't wait for you to hear. So I want to introduce the guest today. And I'm just saying, for this week at least, maybe for the month, she's going to get the coolest name award. And I know you're going to agree with me. So Eli Harwood, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. And I'm so glad you love my name.
Oh, I think it's just fantastic. I'm going to be talking about this for a while. I can already tell. So Eli, tell the listener where you live, what your family life is like, favorite coffee flavor, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. I live in Morrison, Colorado. And so for those of you who are not from Colorado, that's near Red Rocks, if you've ever heard of Red Rocks.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's Foothills is a beautiful place. We're very lucky. We live on an old ranch that was my husband's great-great-grandfather's dairy farm.
Oh,
isn't that amazing?
Perfect.
So we have this very magical space we're raising our kids in. I have 3 kids. I have 2 cats. I have an offensive number of plants. I actually don't drink coffee.
That's okay. That's okay.
Weirdo, but you know what? I've never been able to hack it. My nervous system is just like this. Whatever's happening here with this caffeine thing, we don't like it.
Too much, yeah.
So I take naps, and I am a therapist. I've been practicing for almost 18 years, and I am extremely passionate, aka nerdy, about the topic of attachment. In other words, how do we build relationships with our children, and how does the quality of those dynamics affect their life, our family's life, the trajectory of the world, the whole shebang?
Right. And that's the topic, listener, that I really want you to be paying attention to, is this idea of attachment, how we become connected to other people in our lives, and especially when it comes to our kids and the families that we're building, because, wow, attachment informs everything. So Eli, take us all the way back. Give us a primer on what attachment is, how it functions, when it begins, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to put a little side note here in that when I was getting my psych degree a million years and 8 kids ago, really William Sears was the guy that everybody talked about when it came to attachment. And there were a million ways I was freaked out I was going to get it wrong based on some of his work. And then Sue Johnson came along around 2008, and she's sort of the fairy godmother of attachment, particularly in marital relationships. She has a great book called Hold Me Tight that discusses all of this. So listener, if you want to know more about within your relationship with your spouse, that's a great one to go take a look at. Really, Eli, what I love is the turn you've made to really speak specifically with kids and parents and the things that we can invest in them for both today, the relationships we have with them today, and for the relationships they're going to develop over time. So take us back, give us that little primer of where you come from, how you got interested in attachment. Give us that moment.
Well, and I'll give you the tea on the work from Dr. William Sears.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing that's where you heard from Sue Johnson as well. But that work, he coined the phrase attachment parenting in 2000.
Right.
And wrote a book called Attachment Parenting. He gave recommendations that were actually not based on attachment research or science. He gave recommendations that were based on his impressions from his clinic, which, you know, that's information.
Right.
But it's not the same information that we draw from in the attachment theory, attachment research world. So his recommendations were essentially share beds, hold babies all the time, breastfeed. And those recommendations aren't in any way harmful to your attachment dynamic. So if you want to do all those 3 things and that's a part of your infant care process, fabulous. But that is not actually what the research says develops a secure connection or attachment for our children.
Right.
It is far more about the way that we think about connection, the way that we as caregivers think about care, how responsive we are, how emotionally attuned we are, how warm we are able to be as a pattern. Not perfectly. This is like, let me start. As I talk about this, I'm going to put a little pea in everyone's bonnet. That's not a thing. I guess you don't want a bee in your bonnet, a pea in your bonnet. Anyway.
You know what? I like it. It works for me metaphorically anyway. That's fine.
I'm going to put a little pea in your bonnet.
All right.
Which is this. The research is clear about many things, and one of those things is that this is not about perfection parenting. Nobody is regulated all the time. No parent, no mother is out there like in a Zen state, always receptive, always warm, always getting it right. The key is in consistency. So as I talk about the tenets that we know will help our children thrive through positive relationship with us, please know you're supposed to be getting that right 30 to 50% of the time. So this is not something you're going to build in anxiety about, because that will actually work against what you're doing.
Right.
This is do the best we can with what we have and offer our most earnest, best attempt at it. And that's going to involve crankiness, crispiness, getting it wrong often.
Right. I love that you give that disclaimer right at the top, because I have to say, with my babies, I was wired in a certain way where I really thought I'm killing it because I held them all the time and I did all the things. And that was actually true to my nature, who I am. And I can remember almost the sense of a little bit of confusion, because I would have other moms in my life who were putting their kids to bed at 6:30 at night. See you later, sayonara. We will check back in with you at 7 a.m. And they were doing other forms of feeding. They were doing different things. And they were sure that their way was the right way. And we're kind of looking at my way going, what are you doing? And I was looking at their way going, what are you doing? And in all of it, all of us were wanting to raise resilient, healthy, attached kids.
Yes.
And here's the great thing, Eli. For so many of these situations, even though we were all doing it kind of differently in certain ways in terms of the actual tactics, we ended up with kids that we all kind of like each other, which is a great thing. Right. So I think that is a huge relief off of a mom's shoulders.
I mean, as a therapist, I can tell you when I'm working with people, and they're adults and they're working through trauma and things that went on in their childhood. I'm not going, so were you breastfed or were you bottle fed?
Right.
Oh, that's
what it is. Yeah.
Right. So attachment is the human instinct to cultivate close relationships. And it has different motivations in different stages of life. So babies have an attachment instinct because we birth our children completely helpless. They are unable to function without our care. So they need proximity to regulate their body temperature, their nervous system. Like they cannot survive without us. No human baby has ever crawled out of a uterus, looked up at the mom and gone, I can do better.
Yeah.
I'm going to go, I'm going somewhere else. Like,
right.
We're completely reliant. So in our early childhood, our attachment drive is for survival, belonging, closeness, multiple things. As we age, we get to a point where we can survive on our own technically. But human beings have always survived more adaptedly through social belonging. So if there's a saber-toothed tiger in the midst and there's 10 of us, we're far more likely to survive than if we're on our own out in the bush, right? So this instinct to form and keep close relationships, Sue Johnson's great term about it is from cradle to grave. We are attachment creatures from the beginning to the end. And this instinct to close relationships means that we are going to have efforts of closeness depending on what type of person we're getting close to. So let me explain that. If I'm trying to stay close to a cactus, I'm probably not wrapping my arms around that cactus. Right?
Right.
I'm going to learn how to stay near the cactus without leaning in. And so if I'm staying near to a teddy bear, I'm probably going to wrap my arms around that teddy bear and I'm going to nuzzle my head in. And so who we are as caregivers in terms of our capacity for connection, empathy, steadiness, that's going to affect what our children are able to do in terms of relating to us. And what the research, and there's so much research, so I'm not going to go too nerdy because we got 35 minutes, but here's what I can guarantee you. This is a very well-established body of research that has longitudinal studies, that has replicated studies, and that is very well respected and validated within the psychology community, within the scientific community. So I'm not just talking out my ears like, oh, here's something that might be nice. This is an internet trend. This is well-researched information. And the information says when our children are developing, they need to borrow our brains. They need to borrow our nervous systems. They need to borrow our calmness. They need us. And when we are able to accurately understand their emotions, their needs, their state of mind, their developmental stage, when we're able to go, oh, hey, kid, you're having a hard day. Yeah, I got you. Come here. And we co-regulate. That's a fancy term that basically means comfort and soothe.
Right.
On a regular basis, then we actually offer them an adaptive brain development process. So this is wild. So now we have brain research on this that shows when children have secure experiences, they actually have thicker gray matter in their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that does executive functioning, empathy, problem solving. When children grow up in homes where they feel unsafe, maybe there's chaos, maybe there's lots of tension, maybe there's abuse or neglect, then they're likely to have amygdalas that are double in size of their secure peers. And the amygdala is the reactive part of the brain, right? It's basically like our children are going to develop their brain in response to what is available relationally to them.
Right. I mean, for the amygdala to be that big, that's that flight or fight, listener, that you think about when,
Yes.
and to realize that it literally can be bigger from a really shaky, unstable situation.
Yeah.
Eli, that's wow. That's pretty, it makes you stop and think for sure.
Yes.
What do we do if we feel like as a parent, we want to develop a climate for our child that helps them be securely attached?
Yes.
But we ourselves were raised in an environment that seemed just moment to moment, always shifting, always changing. Or if we feel like we only received love and warmth if we performed a certain way.
Yes.
What do we do when we come to the table feeling that we didn't have the experience or the modeling of this, and yet we know we want to do things differently, but we also recognize that sometimes a sharp 180 isn't the answer either. So
right.
What do we do?
It's how do you give your kids something no one gave to you? How do you do
Right.
something you've never done before, had done? I'm going to give you a couple of key pieces of just practical ways to do this. And then I have 2 books for you, because that's exactly why I wrote these books. It's because I thought, oh my gosh, people need this information and they need it in a clear, understandable way, which I don't feel like has been out there yet. So the first thing to know is the data says that if you had an insecure experience growing up, so your caregivers were either dismissive of your feelings and emotions and needs, disconnected to you, or they were intrusive, they were highly anxious, hovering, you were always awash in their dysregulation, or they were in some way scary, frightening, erratic, chaotic in a way that made you feel deeply physically and emotionally unsafe, you can give your children a secure experience. And the key is to develop a secure relationship to your childhood story. So when we grow up in trauma and insecurity, it is an adaptive response to take on that shame, loss, pain to our own body, to our own self. What's wrong with me that they didn't love me very well? What's wrong with me that I was always being treated in a scary way? And so we have to heal that, and we have to be able to take a real honest look at what we experience in childhood and go, that was not my fault. I did not have control. And to feel sorrow on behalf of that younger part of ourselves and really begin to get support in our lives through therapists, through church communities, through friendships, through, mentors, to help us experience the kind of empathy, care, attunement, and support we needed in childhood, but in response to our childhood story. So there's a power in having witnesses, people around us who can go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to you. I wish I could just wrap little you up in a blanket and just let you cry in my arms, right? And then we cry in response to that person saying that, and we allow ourselves to grieve that we didn't get to have that secure experience, that we're going to be the, matriarch or, the beginner of that healing process in our family system because it wasn't handed down to us.
Right.
And then when we've done some of that healing work on ourselves, our nervous system gets more regulated. And when our nervous system is more regulated, we are far more capable of being in the presence of our children in their emotional states, which all children have, and staying steady and staying connected and not shutting down or blowing up or overreacting or hovering, but just saying, I'm here, kid. I got you. I mean, memorize those 2 words. I'm here, kid. I got you.
I got you. Yeah.
You could say those things over and over and over again and mean them. There are 4 things I like to tell parents who did not have secure experiences to sort of bookmark in their mind. So these are just quick little quips that you can go, okay, if I can do this, at least I know I'm giving them a real shot at secure experience with me. The first is to light up when your children come into the room, like a dog. That's why our dogs are our best friends, because they give us this unconditional excitement. Our kids need to see and know they are wanted by us, because when they go out into the world, they aren't going to be wanted by everyone. And that's hard. Right. But it is a whole lot less hard when you know there's a place that you're going to go back to where people are glad you are there. Right. So we light up around our kids in their presence, and not for what they're doing, just for being there. Okay. The second thing is that we show up. So we show up for these 2 very important things. They're tender moments. So they're sad, they're scared, they're ashamed, they've had a breakup, they're feeling overwhelmed by a math test. They've lost a friend. Something really big has happened in the world. They're tender. And when they're 2, it's just simply that they can't have another popsicle. Right. We show up and we are there for them, which means I see your feelings. I'm holding them with you. I'm not trying to shut you down. I'm not trying to shame you. Again, I'm here. I got you. And then they're triumphant moments. Mm-hmm. They're graduating from kindergarten. They finally got that, essay turned in. They never thought they were going to, right? They overcome a bully, like that feeling in our child of celebration, of I did it. We need to show up for that, because our kids remember that. They look out at that, championship baseball game and they're like, my parents aren't here. Right. Or my parents are there. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to do that perfectly. So reminder on the perfect thing. We all have lots of things going on. I work, you work, we have stuff going on. But we consistently work to show up. The third thing we do is we listen up. We build the type of relationship with our children where they know they have a voice. They know that they can share their feelings, their thoughts, their opinions, their frustrations, their pushback on our stuff. They can say, Mom, you're being a little harsh. And we can take a minute and go, I am. Okay. I know you're right. Mommy needs a timeout. I'll be right back. Right? But we offer them an experience relationally where they know they are heard, because they listen to us all the time. And yes, they do need to be listening to us because we're their best guide. But if we are listening to them, that creates a type of bond and encounter that deepens their sense of their worth in the world and trust in their body and trust in their intuition. And then the last thing we do is we make up when we mess up. Mm-hmm. We need to be the leaders of repair. Right. So yes, our kids are going to cause conflicts. Like technically, legally, they are going to be sometimes the person at fault. It doesn't matter. We are the leaders of repair. When we are off track, when we are off course, we come back to our kids and we say, that was a really hard conversation. Can we try it again? I don't think I handled that all the way I wanted to, or I don't know that you felt all the way heard. What do we need here? How do we get there? Or just simply, I know we're struggling and I don't exactly know how to get us back on track, but I want you to know I love you. I'm here and I'm thinking about it, and we're going to figure it out. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I know we're going to figure it out. Right. So if you're doing those 4 things, right? Let's review real quick. You're lighting up,
yep.
showing up, listening up, and making up. If you're doing those 4 things and with consistency, you're giving your kid an unbelievable legacy of security that many of us did not have.
Right. And those 4 things, I love how you've simplified it. It's easy to get your head around that and to really begin seeing the places where you may realize, oh, I'm doing that one. Like I'm good at that one. And then the places where you're like, that one, I'm going to need to get some tutoring on that. That one's a little bit tougher for me. On the lighting up, it makes me think about, Eli, this great story that was told about Rosemary Clooney. So, I am a little bit of a Rosemary Clooney nerd. I just loved her. She was a cinema star back in the day, the golden age of Hollywood, and White Christmas. She was in White Christmas with Bing Crosby. Her nephew is actually George Clooney. So, Okay. I just feel like on George's behalf, I just have tracked, Rosemary. And
it's so thoughtful of you.
I know. Isn't that great of me? Mm-hmm. And I read one time about her that her grandchildren talked about there was nothing in the world like having Rosemary Clooney as your grandmother, not because of the Hollywood history, but because when you walked in a room, she would just completely light up. She was so delighted to see you, and her kids and her grandkids talking about that legacy of her light up when, you would come into her presence. So I just love that you bring that up as a very easy first step to remind us to be excited to see our kids. Such a great thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. Hashtag
Eli,
parenting goals.
Hashtag, yeah, exactly. Eli, tell me how we can do a little bit of a self-check as moms, because as you say, a lot of times, whatever skills or lack thereof, or maybe what I would call anti-skills, like the things we're doing in the opposite direction from the goal we have for our kids to feel a sense of secure connection. How do we do a self-check on where we are on something like that? For example, I can tell you that one of the things that I was doing with some of my kids, the ones that we now call the olders, was when they got upset or they were crying or something like that, I was very quick to try to distract them out of that. Jazz hands, look over here. I in no way was wanting to minimize their feelings. That wasn't what I was trying to do. But what I was doing was trying to regulate my own nervous system, because them being upset would get me upset. And I was doing it in a different way, maybe in the way in which I was raised. But I can look back now and go, oh, that's why it was for their own comfort. I was trying to comfort them, but I wasn't often validating what they were feeling in the moment, and just taking that short pause. Okay, let's just sit here with this. You're upset about, I gave you the wrong color sippy cup. I didn't let you have a second popsicle. How can we begin to identify, oh, okay, that's why I'm doing this. And that's why I need to make a bit of a sea change. What are the things we need to be looking for in our own attachment style that can leak over into how we're parenting?
Yes. So in when we look at the different studies on attachment and the different patterns, we're always, the gold standard is secure. We want our children to have a secure attachment experience or pattern within their relationship to us. And the other three categories, the other insecure categories, tell us something about where we get off that track. So one way we get off that track, we would call avoidance. So avoidance is that internal script inside of our minds, inside of our bodies, that says emotions are a burden, emotions are indulgent, emotions are overwhelming, find a way out, right? And that is different than what the secure mindset says. The secure mindset says find a way through. And that's very subtly different in that moment, because the child's melting down about their sippy cup and you're going, look over here, here's a birdie, here's a birdie, here's a birdie. Your attempt is to regulate, but it's just missing that first step of helping your child understand their emotions.
Right.
So, we want our children to know how to feel their feelings, label their feelings, share their feelings, because when we can do that, we don't have a fear of feelings, which means we're less likely to engage in things like drinking in order to regulate, things that are more about shutting down or getting away. So be aware, if when emotion comes into the room, if your instinct is make it go away, that you have yet to develop a relationship with emotions where you can tolerate a feeling state and move through it. And so your work is mindfulness work. It's learning how to build your emotion tolerance. Feel your feelings for longer. And what I want to say to anyone who feels this way is feelings are like waves. I promise they go up. I promise they go down.
Go down. Yeah, absolutely.
And the panic that's happened in your mind is that no one helped you move through your feelings. You've only learned to move away from them. And so inside your brain, you're not sure what happens if you move towards them. It's like, do we all drown here? Like, I don't know, because no one ever allowed that process.
Right.
So that's one area. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go. Yeah, I'm loving this. Keep going.
Okay. So the second area, we reference it with a few different words, and you don't need to remember all of these words, but it would be about enmeshment. Okay. So hypervigilance, preoccupation. So when a child is having an emotion, if it is your instinct to feel panic, and instead of wanting to move away from the emotion, your brain becomes obsessed with the emotion. It's like, are you okay? Are you okay now? Are you sure? Oh my gosh. Are you going to talk to your therapist about this later? Is this it? I've ruined you. We've ruined you. Right.
Yeah.
That deep sense of it's my job to make sure to rescue you in relationship to your feelings, but actually I just jump in the water with you and I don't even know how to swim. So, one, that avoidance is, I don't want this water around here. So I'm going to find a way to for us to move away from the water. That preoccupied mindset is, I'm so afraid that you're in the water at all that I'm jumping in with you. And now we're both drowning in the water. The secure mindset is, oh yeah, water. Well, here's what we do in water. Here's how we swim. Here's how we move. Here's how we get from one side to the other. And then the last one is, if you had abusive or really deeply traumatic experiences with caregivers, you might have inherited mindsets of blame and shame, and have an instinct to push your children under the water when they're in the water.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with you? Why did you get yourself here again? You're such an idiot. Oof, I don't even like talking like that to anyone who had abuse. I feel like I should have trigger warned you that I'm a good actress.
Yeah.
But that deep internalized feeling of this is bad, you're bad, or I'm bad, therefore you're bad. I mean, that tense accusatory response to emotions and needs. In all three of those insecure categories, what I want you doing is reflecting on your childhood. I want you understanding how you inherited those mindsets and then learning secure mindsets. I have my new book that's out is for parents. It's called Raising Securely Attached Kids. And the entire focus is to teach anyone who did not know how to do this or did not experience it, what it looks like. And I go through and I sprinkle in the science throughout it. And these little nerd alerts is what I call them, because I call myself the attachment nerd.
Love it.
So you can learn through that or not. But my first book is a guided journal. And that one is designed to help you do this reflection on your own story. So, and it's focused more on romantic relationships, but it applies to whatever it is you're working towards in terms of secure dynamics. This is hard work.
Right.
And it's complicated.
And I think that is such a great thing to remind us of, because so often it feels like to me, we want something simple. Just give me a simple tool. Now, I think there are ways to simplify a complex concept, as you have done. And yet, there's also that need to be aware that this is not something that you read once or twice, you go chat with a therapist once or twice, and you figured out. This is something that is ongoing. This is something you have to grow in skill around. It's something you have to grow in comfort around. I think too, Eli, one of the things that I find that's interesting with people is that when we think about that last category you talked about, if someone has been through a lot of trauma or an abuse situation, we sort of hold that as, well, that's not what my childhood was like. Like, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't anything like that. And yet we can forget that to a child, there are things that can seem really big that we have to honor and we need to give voice to, because in the scope of being a little kid, and people who are older than you are big and scary. And when things are unknown and you don't have the workaround of, well, we've got the extra credit card, I can call so-and-so who knows what to do. You don't have any of those tools. So how do we honor that inner child that we all carry and not talk ourselves out of? Because I think that's one of the places of trying to understand where you're attached, where you got some hiccups, where there's some kinks in the chain, is not trying to talk ourselves out of what our experiences actually were, or contrasting them to something truly horrific and then pulling all the way back and going, well, but it wasn't that.
Yeah. Well, what's one thing that's interesting for me in the data is that when we look at adults who had secure childhoods and how they think about their experiences, they are, one of the skill sets they have is they are able to acknowledge pain with more specificity. So when we are secure, we have more permission to feel the range of feelings we have about things. And that's the long-term goal. So if you're going, my childhood wasn't that bad. Like, I mean, nobody beat me. Like, come on, let's move on from this. You want to pause and go, wait a minute. What do I want for my kids? I want my kids to be able to have a nuanced relationship with their body and the world. I want them to be able to say to me, hey, Mom, when you did that thing in 3rd grade, it kind of hurt, because I want to know so that I can repair, so that we can have that conversation, right? So I have to learn how to do that in my own story. And I want everyone to know that two things can be true at the same time. So for those of you who had deeply abusive parents, you probably have already concluded they were deeply abusive because you got away and you're listening to a podcast like this.
Right.
So you have already gone, that was not okay. So this part isn't even maybe for you. This part is for someone who maybe had caregivers that you're like, you knew they loved you, but you couldn't feel their love. You knew they cared about you, but the things they did were ultimately intrusive, overwhelming, problematic, etc. It can be true that your caregivers did the very best they could with what they had, and that what they had to give you was not enough for you to have a secure attachment to them.
Great
so
distinction.
we're not trying to like throw shade at every parent. We are looking at generational patterns. And I like to say that what gets broken over generations also has to get healed over generations. So we're not expecting ourselves or our parents to have done everything right, but they may have done a few things right, and that's great. And we need to heal our nervous systems from the things that were painful, confusing, disorienting, overwhelming, so that we aren't loading our children with that emotional, unconscious luggage.
Right.
Because if we keep going, it was fine, we're going to send that information to our kids without the story. And now they're holding the feelings and they don't know why, which is probably what happened to us.
Right.
So we really want to go back and go, what was it like when I was sad? What did my caregivers do? What was their capacity? What happened when I messed up? What was the message? How reactive was everybody? How avoidant was everybody? What about when I was lonely? Was I allowed to need, or was neediness seen as indulgent? Do that reflecting and allow yourself to grieve on behalf of the younger parts of you that didn't have some of those secure things, so that you have more clarity too on what it is you're doing for your kids.
Right. With our kids, I can hear the question bubbling potentially from the listener, which is this. Okay, I want my children to feel securely attached. I want to sit with them in their emotion. But at what point? So they're 2 and they're upset about the popsicle. And I see you, kid. I got you. Okay, I got it. I remember what Eli told me. And now we're moving into being 7, 8, 9. And now I'm projecting forward of kids going to college who don't know how to do their own laundry and are calling mom every 30 minutes and aren't getting their driver's license and aren't doing these things that typically have been sort of the, bridge to a hashtag adulting 1.0, So how do we do that self-check of, yes, being available and being there and helping our kids in these ways, and yet at the same time, not allowing them to hit the point where we've moved beyond co-regulating and they're looking to us to completely regulate all the things, even though they are moving into later stages of development.
So there's a difference between comforting and coddling. And from the research, what we know is that when we respond with warmth and attunement, it actually is a paradox. The more secure our children feel with us in early childhood, the more independent they are. That's what the data says. So kids who experience that security. But there's a key piece here. Coddling is, I am anxious as a parent, and I do not want my children to experience suffering and pain. And so I'm responding in ways because I want them not to feel these feelings, because I am afraid of their overwhelm. I don't want their suffering pain because I still can't tolerate my own. And so I am not creating the structure they need to grow either. Chapter 3 of my book, or 4 or 5, actually I don't remember which chapter. Anyway, one of the chapters in my book.
One of the chapters in there
is called Structure is Nurture's Best Friend. And so when we are helping to raise our children, we want them to have capability as well as connectedness. So I am going to reassure my 2-year-old about the popsicle, but I'm also not going to give them the popsicle. I'm going to say, I'm so sorry you're having that feeling. It's really hard not to have a second popsicle. I get that. But it's mama's job to keep your body healthy and safe. And popsicles aren't great for our teeth. And we've already had one. And it's also hard to sleep after we've had too much sugar. So we're not going to have a popsicle. You can have an apple. You can have some whatever. But we are giving them the guidelines that then help them to move. So as they develop, as they age, my 9-year-old does his laundry. Because you better believe I'm not sending that child out into the world to potentially marry some woman who is doing his laundry. Like, no.
Yep.
And he can cook a meal. I can take a HelloFresh box and set it down, and my 9-year-old can cook that entire meal.
Right.
And when my kids are like, Mom, get me a snack, and I'm doing something and they're sitting on the couch, I'm like, remind me where the snacks are. Like, in the cupboard. I'm like, oh, great. You can get them.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So we are scaffolding our children as they get built, but we're not doing it all for them. And we want to be paying attention to their level of capability. And listen, all our kids are different. This is different for neurodivergent kids. This is different for highly sensitive kids. Like, you're not, there's no formula. I can't say like at 9 years old, all of your kids should be cooking from HelloFresh and doing their laundry. Not every 9-year-old's going to be able to do that.
Right.
But my 9-year-old can. And did he want to initially? Not necessarily, but he's come to evolve to understanding how awesome it is to have independence, right? If I'm out at a market or something with my kids and one of my kids is like, hey, I want a hot dog. And we're all sitting around talking. I'm like, great, here's my credit card. Go get a hot dog. Like, they go up and they talk to that adult themselves and they say, may I please have a hot dog? And they hand them the credit card and they get the receipt and they wait for the hot dog because they need that practice, right? So I think, remember that we are the shelter, we are the safe haven for when our children are in states of distress and tenderness, but we are also the secure base to help them launch out into the world. So it is not about hovering. It is not about doing for. It is about being there with when they need us. And when they don't need us, it's about allowing that distance and that process so that they can get practice trying, failing, and figuring it out.
Thank you to our sponsor, George Fox University. George Fox University is unique. It is a Christ-centered, student-focused university where your student is going to be appreciated for the individual they are, the learning style, and the goals that they have, while also keeping focus on their relationship with Christ. I want you to go check it out at georgefox.edu. Again, that's georgefox.edu. Thanks so much for being our sponsor, George Fox. I would add this, and I know this is not going to be every listener's experience, but one thing that I had to watch out for, Eli, is I did a pretty good job. I'm going to give him a little pat on the back here. The oldest 4 kids, they had to, in a sense, because there were all these younger kids I was chasing, right? So they were great at being able to order the thing and do this and do that. And then there came a moment, and I'm just going to warn you now, listener, because if you've got a older kid or two who are very, very capable, those little younger ones would sometimes, I would be the one going, no, can't, you're going to need to help it yourself. And one of the older kids would jump in and do for the younger. So we had to have here's how we order from Starbucks lessons at an age you would not have expected, because I realized that we are designed in many ways to look for the easiest way to do things. And so if something seems a little hard, it can seem a whole lot more efficient to have your older brother or your older sister do it, even if mom is holding the line and mom gets distracted and doesn't realize. So those family dynamics are interesting too. When we talk about birth order, when we talk about the capacity maybe of your oldest child, and if they're one who is something of a natural leader and feels that independence and then relates that into, if I do this for my younger sibling, that makes me even more capable and independent. So a little bit of an interesting dynamic to think through, because those personality roles play a role.
Well, and where I have a pitfall on this is that my life is somewhat busier than I'd love it to be. I'm working on it, but I can fall into that, my child, Mommy, can you open this? And I'm just in that mode of trying to just get everything ready and do the thing. Right. And so then I open it instead of going, let me show you how to do this. Right. And so I think reminding ourselves too that this is the moment to empower and equip them. We want to connect with them and we want to equip them. And we're doing both of those things. And this is a bit of a dance. And again, we're not going to do it right all the time. And every single one of our kids is going to grow up without some particular skill that later we're like,
how did we miss that one? Yeah.
I missed it. I thought I had it down, but I never taught you blank. Yeah. That's okay. But we can hold within our minds both compassion and growth. I feel you, kid, and here's what I'm going to help you do.
Right. I think this is such a beautiful way of taking a broader look in my mind, with the gentle parenting movement that's been really big and those kinds of things. And there's some really beautiful lessons to learn from that. But I also have understood the pushback from some parents going,
absolutely.
Well, at what point, am I going to help
Yes.
this kid be able to deal with some stuff on their own? What is
Right.
your perspective on that? Because I'd be really curious to hear what
Yeah.
you're seeing in terms of your practice.
Well, I mean, first of all, gentle parenting is not a research-based anything. It's just a term that one internet influencer made.
Right.
I can't remember her name. But the ideology around it, I think, was so powerful and so important because it's highlighting children deserve to be treated with human respect and regard.
1,000%. Yeah.
But I think that's part of why I'm writing these books on the research is I'm like, I want you all to understand that this is not permissive parenting. Like if we're going to offer our children secure experiences, we are not their vending machine. It's not about you want this, you get this, here you go, here's that. We have to equip them with the tools for tolerating when things don't go their way, because things don't go our way all the time in human life. So I do think that we have swung a bit of a pendulum in that particular community of giving parents the skills to be empathetic and compassionate, but not necessarily the skills to truly hold boundaries, to create the structure, to challenge our children, to allow them to experience that moment of like, you can do this. I know you can. I got you. But you can do this. And I do think that in classrooms, I'm hearing this a lot from teachers, children who literally never heard the word no, like somewhere that went around as like a point of advice, like you never have to say the word no. And I'm like, oi, okay.
Yeah.
It's too far for me. It's too far. But I think that's a missing the tree for the forest thing of like, this isn't about not having limits. This is about having support for your children when they are processing the limits.
Right. That's a great way of saying that, because we're going to have limits as humans.
Yes.
I mean, even if they don't experience it in your house, there is still going to be, I don't know, traffic laws, things like that. Like we can't just decide, do we like the red light? Do we not? Maybe we're not going to observe.
I don't feel like I'm in the mood for a red light.
I don't feel like I'm in the mood for that either. Yeah.
No, and again, this is messy.
Right.
I'm so aware of all of the infinite dynamics that exist in people's lives and children and all of the things. But we're looking at our kids and we're going, how do I help you feel loved? And how do I help you gain capability?
Right.
And we're doing that in concert with one another, with each of those things, weaving it back and forth.
I know that the listener's going to have this question too, because this has been a hot topic within the world of parenting. And when we talk about attachment, our kids are going to do stuff that they mess up. They're going to take a swing at a sibling. They're going to be disrespectful in the way they talk to us. They may even steal a pack of gum from the grocery store. Within the world of attachment theory, what are the ways that we deal with that and create correction? And part of what I'm asking here too is it feels like there's been a bit of a wave of, well, we never want anyone to feel shame or guilt. And that's been interesting to me because shame and guilt are also legit emotions, sometimes useful emotions, sometimes abusive emotions. So I'm not saying they're without, any kind of blowback. How do we continue to create that connection, that attachment, while we may have to do something that to our kid in the moment doesn't feel supportive and might even make them feel kind of bad?
Right. Well, I think remember that we're not trying to make our kids feel bad. They're going to feel bad. That's going to be a part of the process. And we want to help them understand why they feel bad and what they can do about it. I'm thinking of a time when my oldest, he's now 9, but he was probably 4 at the time. We were at Vitamin Cottage and there was this shiny package of chapstick right on the counter. And I am sitting next to him watching him. And I made the choice not to intervene because I wanted him to go through the process. And so I watched him pick up the chapstick and look around the room and put it in his pocket. And I paid for our groceries. And before we left the grocery store, I took him off to the side and I just said, I saw you put the chapstick in your pocket. And he looked at me like, right? So he had feelings of guilt and shame. I didn't have to put those there, right? He knew that this wasn't totally right. He knew he wanted it. He also knew that mama's going to say no because I'm pretty clear on some of my store boundaries. I'm like, we're not getting, these are the things on our list. This is what we're getting. And he was caught between his desire for this chapstick and the reality of my boundaries, right? And so I just looked at him and I said, that chapstick doesn't belong to us. Do you know what it's called when we take something that doesn't belong to us? And he looked, I mean, he couldn't even process. He was like nonverbal at this point. And I was like, it's called stealing. And that's a really big problem. And if we steal big things, we get in really big trouble, but we can still get in trouble when we steal little things. And I just said, so we haven't left the store yet. Technically, it's in the store. I would love to help you make a really good choice right now. What do you think a good choice would be? And then at this point, he could sense that I'm not annihilating him. I'm not looking at him like he's a horrible person. I'm not going, how could you do this? And treating him like he's a future psychopath. But I'm also not being permissive. I'm not pretending. I'm not going, oopsie, did you accidentally put that chapstick in your pocket? We're contending with the reality of what happened. And then I said, what do you think we should do? And he said, put it back and say sorry. And I was like, that sounds great. So he went up and he put it in the thing and he looked up the lady and he could not use his words at this point. And so I just said, hey, my son here, he took this chapstick without paying for it. So he's putting it back and he wants to apologize. And the lady said, thank you so much. And he goes, and then we went out of the car and he cried a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
and
is
he processed
appropriate
that situation.
Yeah.
Right. And you can apply that to all areas of our child's development. I think sometimes we think that our job is to have control of our children. And so when they do something bad, we feel like we really have to double down to get control over them. But our job is to be a guide. It's to help them reflect. It's to help them process. It's to, if this was a teenager and I found out they'd stolen, I don't know, a pair of shorts from Zoomies, I would find the shorts and I'd leave the shorts up on their bathroom counter so that they could see that I saw them and they know that we didn't pay for those shorts. And then I would wait till they came back to me and I would say, let's talk about the shorts. And then they would say, so-and-so stole them or something, right? Like, you're going to make up some excuse. And I'm going to say, I don't know if that's true or not. Right now, I'm having a hard time trusting you because there's a pair of stolen shorts in your room. Here's what I do know. It's something that we need to rectify. It's something we need to repair. Do you want to come up with a plan or do you need me to come up with the plan? Right? And sometimes our kids are going to be like, I'll bring it back. And I'll be like, great. How do you want to get there? Will you take me? I will take you. Okay. And what do you want to say when you bring them back? Right. And I might prepare them for the fact that at your age, they might actually have to make a report. Mm-hmm. Well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Well, I'm not positive, but probably what's going to happen is this and this and this, and we're going to figure it out together. And if they're like, I don't know, I can't do it, then it's like, okay, well, we're going to go do it together. But we're giving them the opportunity to make things right. So when our kids are off course, what we need them to do is process why it's off course in a way that is not about your bad. It's about this thing is problematic. Here's why. And here's what we do in our family to make things right when we've gotten them wrong. Right. But we also want to look beneath the behavior. What's going on with you, kid? You must not be doing well if you're feeling like you got to snag a pair of shorts. Because I know for a fact you got 17 of those in your drawer. What's happening? Right? Or maybe you don't have 17 in your drawer. So I know that you're really, really wanting to be able to fit in with the kids who have more money in our community. I don't know, like there's a understanding piece of this that is also interventive.
Right. It makes me think about something I've said to my kids for a long time when we are sitting at the table trying to work through a math lesson or do whatever, and the anxiety begins to rise. And we know our brains don't do a good job learning when we are completely freaked out.
Correct.
So as parents, when we can hold space, even when our kid has legit done something wrong that violates the family code, the moral code, the faith code, when we can hold space to let them think through it, process, help them process, but not make that amygdala go even more wild.
Yes, exactly.
We really are creating a better opportunity for if there's something that happens again, or there's a temptation again, or whatever happens, that they can actually learn it instead of just being frozen and freaked out. I think that's a beautiful way that you talk about talking us through that. Well, let me ask you this one last thing, and then I want you to have a chance to talk us through the resources that you have, because you have such a wealth of great things. That word structure, Eli, when I hear the word structure, I feel like a lot of parents interpret that word in a lot of different ways, which is highly ironic
Yes.
when we're talking about a word that feels as concrete as structure. So I know there are certain parents that structure means the schedule. We never deviate from the schedule. No matter where we are, we are going to have the schedule. There are other parents who it's the moral code. That's the structure. There are other parents. I mean, there are all these different things that come up as structure. How do you define structure and its role in creating healthy attachment?
I love this. So I think of predictability. It is one of the greatest advantages we can give to a child in their learning process. Because if I wake up in the morning and I have a sense of what's coming next, and this has different domains. So schedule is a domain, but we want to be cautious that we are sturdy and not strict.
Oh, that's okay. You got to say that again. That's so good. That's just gold.
Sturdy, but not strict.
Oh, love it.
And
T-shirts. We need T-shirts.
Is consistency involves some flexibility, right? But it doesn't involve erratic changes in everything, right? So if every single day we get up and we do something very different, that's not consistent enough. But if every single day we get up and do the exact same thing at the exact same time, that's too rigid, right? We have to attune to the system. I mean, I don't know how you do this with 8 kids. I have 3 and it's absolutely nuts. But it's the structure of how we engage each other. What do we do when we have a grief or a complaint with somebody in the family? We're teaching children that. The other thing to know about structure is that it takes time to teach certain types of structures. You're teaching your kids simply the process of brushing your teeth 2 times a day for like 7 years until they finally get that structure, right?
Right.
And similarly, we have to look at the brain development of our children and how they're going to be able to handle something or not handle something. So routine, rules, family missions, there can be structure around our affection and our play. Like, a big structure in my family is we play together. Every day there is play. One of my favorite mentors of sorts was Dr. Karen Purvis at the Child Institute at Texas Christian University. And she says families that play together stay together. And so, there's like these are the different ways we play. This is what it looks like. This is how this play goes. But it's giving children things they can predict in the environment and in their relationship to us that helps them learn and grow. So, there's structure around the laundry for my son. Your laundry, we will put your laundry through some of the time, but you are folding it, you are putting it away, right? And sometimes you're, putting it all the way in and all the way through because you want to. Great. But for sure, you are always doing these 2 steps of your laundry.
Right.
And so there's an understanding of what to expect.
Right. Of the flow. And I think that is really one of the key words, right? Just creating a level where a kid knows what to expect, that it's not just a new day every day. Yesterday it was super important. You do this. Today I'm ignoring it or I've forgotten. I just love the way you put that together. Structure, not strict. That's fantastic. Okay. Eli, I know the listeners are going to be like, okay, I've got to have more of this woman's insight and wisdom. I want to learn more. So tell us about the new book and where the listener can go to find that. And then other resources that I know that you have. I've been out scouting around on the interwebs and checking out your resources. So I want the listener to know about those.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with free resources, which is I run my mouth on the internet, on Instagram and Facebook, primarily a little bit on TikTok at Attachment Nerd. So I am weekly giving you lots of ways and tips of how can I create this relationship with my kid, with my partner that is secure, and what do I do in the tricky moments. So go get all of your social medias out there. And then I have free resources and free webinars on my website. If you go to attachmentnerd.com, you can find them there. I have a full webinar on like sexual abuse prevention, on mastering your calm as a parent, things that you can just go to and access immediately. And then my new book, which is probably, it's the thing I'm most excited about. It's like my manifesto. It's called Raising Securely Attached Kids, Connected Parenting for Confidence, Empathy, and Resilience. And I wrote it like that because it's for ourselves and for our children. It's so that we can feel confident, empathetic, and resilient as a parent, and so that we can imbue those things into our children as well. And you can buy that wherever you buy books. So you can go to Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, all the places. Awesome. And then my first book is The Guided Journal. And that's for those of you who are listening to this going, I've got some stuff from my own childhood I really need to process. And it's playing out in my romantic partnerships. It's playing out in my friendships. I don't actually know how to create secure dynamics with the people I need to lean on. And that's a really important step in your parenting process, because when you're buffered by support in your life, it's a lot easier to handle that moment when your kids need you to be the buffer.
Right.
So
You're healthy. That's
there
amazing. Well, Eli, thank you so much. Again, my favorite name, at least for the rest of this week and probably the rest of the month, because it's just such a great name. But even better than that is the wisdom and insight and experience that you share. I know the listeners are going to love it. Again, thanks so much for being with me.
Loved it. Thank you for having me.
All right, listener, you know the drill. Get to the show notes. Rebecca puts those together each and every week. You'll find the links and all the stuff that Eli's been talking about to help you understand yourself better, help you take your parenting to a place where you are really equipping and imbuing your kids with what they need to feel connected and confident, resilient, all those great things. So be sure and check that out. Also, AllMomDoes, AllMomDoes.com, on the socials and the blog, all the stuff. A great community of women walking through seasons of life just like you are. And I love to connect with you too. Julie Lyles Carr on Instagram mainly. Come see me there. And as always, I love it when you send me questions and topic ideas and all that kind of stuff. So please keep sending that, because that really helps us shape the show and look for great guests like Eli. And I'll see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.